Across the worlds of Warhammer 40,000 and Age of Sigmar, there's an abundance of mighty heroes and warriors, all with a variety of different skin tones. In this video, we'll be showing you how you can paint 3 of those skin tones. We'll be using Neve's Black Talons for this, but the techniques we'll be using can be used on any models you like. Let's get started. The paints we'll be using are on screen now, as well as any additional equipment we've used. If you're new to painting or want to brush up on your skills, you can check out the Citadel Colour Painting Essentials videos to learn all about our paints and painting techniques. We've undercoated our models with Mechanicus Standard Grey, but all the colour schemes we're about to show you can be applied over any undercoat, so choose whichever you'd like. The first skin tone we're going to show you how to paint is Pale Skin. We'll start by base coating the skin with Kislev Flesh. We'll be doing this using a small base brush. Thin it down with some water first until it's a milky consistency, and then apply the Kislev Flesh all over the skin in several thin layers. 3 or 4 thin layers to do the trick. Just make sure to let each layer dry before painting the next one. It's also important that when we paint each layer, we avoid painting over the same area more than once. Even if the paint hasn't covered very well, try to resist adding more paint until it's dry, and we can go back and add more in the next layer. This way, we'll avoid any unwanted texture building up. The base coat of Kislev Flesh has been applied, and now we're going to move on to shading the skin. We'll be using Reikland Flesh Shade for this, applying it straight from the pot. We want this to sink into all the recesses and add some definition to the skin. You'll only need 1 coat of this, but it can take quite a while to dry. We'd recommend leaving it for about an hour or so before moving on to the next step. The Reikland Flesh Shade is now fully dried, and you can see it's really helped to define the skin. We're now going to go back to Kislev Flesh and layer over all the raised areas of the skin. Whereas last time we base coated all the skin, this time we want to leave all those recessed areas shaded. We'll be applying this in 2 thin layers. Now that the second layer of Kislev Flesh is dried, we can see that the skin is really starting to shape up. All it needs now is a highlight. We'll be highlighting the pale skin using Flayed 1 Flesh. We're going to use a small layer brush here and just pick out all the raised areas like the nose and the eyebrows too. How much or how little you highlight is completely up to you. Take your time and don't worry if you make any mistakes. We can always go back with our previous paints and fix them up. And there we are. Our pale skin is complete and it looks great. The second skin tone we're going to show you how to paint is a dark skin tone. We're going to do this using the same methods and techniques as before, but this time we're going to switch up the paints to get a different result. We'll start by base coating the skin with Katachan Flesh. We'll be doing this using a small base brush. Just like the last base coat, thin it down with some water first and then apply it over the whole skin in several thin layers. Make sure to let the first layer dry before moving on to the next one. We've applied all the Katachan Flesh and now we're going to move on to shading the skin. We're using Agrax Earthshade this time, applying it straight from the pot. Again, we want this to sink into all the recesses and add some definition to the skin. You'll only need 1 coat of this, but remember to leave it to dry for about an hour before moving on to the next step. Now that our dark skin has been shaded, we've added some really nice definition to it. Next, we're going to layer all over the raised areas using Blood Reaver Flesh. We'll be using a small layer brush for this, being careful to avoid all the recesses and leave them shaded. If you do accidentally get any Blood Reaver Flesh into any unwanted areas, we can easily go back with some Agrax Earthshade and fix it up. And there we are! We've finished layering Blood Reaver Flesh all over the raised areas and it's made the skin look awesome. All that's left is to add a highlight. We'll be highlighting all the raised areas with Night Questor Flesh using a small layer brush. Once again, we're looking to pick out areas like the eyebrows and the nose, but how much you highlight is up to you. Our dark skin tone is complete and it looks great. As you saw, we used the same techniques and methods as before, but swapped out the paints to achieve a different result. The main thing to remember is to base coat, shade the skin, layer over the raised areas, and then finish off with a highlight. For our final example, we're going to show you how to paint a tanned skin tone. Start by base coating with Cadian Flesh Tone. Don't forget to apply it in thin layers and let each layer dry before moving on to the next one. Next, we're going to wash all the Cadian Flesh Tone using Guilliman Flesh Contrast Paint. We're going to thin this down with some contrast medium first to make it a little lighter. We've thinned it down to 1 part medium to 1 part Guilliman Flesh, but you can use it straight from the pot if you'd like to. Once that's dry and the skin has been shaded, we can go back with Cadian Flesh Tone and layer over all the raised areas, being careful to avoid the recesses. If you do accidentally get some Cadian Flesh Tone into the recesses, remember that you can always go back with some Guilliman Flesh and paint over any mistakes. Apply this in a couple of thin layers. Finally, we're going to highlight our tan skin with Kislev Flesh. We'll thin it down with a small amount of water first and then start applying it to all the raised areas on the skin. We finished applying the Kislev Flesh highlight and now our tan skin tone is complete. And there we are. There's just a few easy ways you can paint great looking skin tones onto your models. For more tutorials, tips and tricks, check out our videos on the Warhammer YouTube channel. Or head to your local Warhammer store where our amazing staff will be happy to help. We hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.